Adrien Broner was supposed to be boxing's next superstar, a four-division world champion with elite skills, swagger, and a personality that drew comparisons to Floyd Mayweather. With speed, power, and confidence, he took the sport by storm, dazzling fans with his flashy style inside and outside the ring. But for all his talent, Broner's biggest battle wasn't against an opponent, it was against himself. The same qualities that made him a star would lead to his downfall. Poor decisions, reckless spending, and a lack of discipline turned his career into a cautionary tale. As the losses piled up, so did the troubles outside the ring. Legal battles, financial struggles, and alarming public meltdowns overshadowed his accomplishments. Once a fighter with limitless potential, Broner now finds himself at rock bottom, searching for redemption. From riches to ruin, this is the tragic reality of Adrien, the problem, Broner. At 35 years old, Adrien Broner had all the talent in the world. At his peak, he was seen as the next big star in boxing, an unstoppable force with charisma and skills. A kid from Cincinnati, Ohio, who grew up in tough surroundings, Broner found his escape in the boxing gym, dedicating himself to the sport from a young age. Fighting his way through the amateur ranks, he turned pro in 2008, and from the moment he stepped into the ring, it was clear that Broner wasn't just another prospect, he was special. With blazing hand speed, sharp reflexes, and an undeniable swagger, Broner tore through opponents, knocking them out with ease. His confidence was unmatched, and his talent undeniable. In just a few years, he became a world champion, winning titles in multiple weight divisions from 130 pounds to 147. Broner climbed the ranks effortlessly, making it look easy. With each victory, the comparisons to Floyd Mayweather grew louder, some even believed he could carry the sport after Mayweather's retirement. But it wasn't just his performances inside the ring that made Broner a household name, it was his larger-than-life personality. The flashy entrances, the trash talk, the extravagant lifestyle, Broner embraced the role of a superstar. He flaunted his wealth on social media, throwing money in nightclubs, buying luxury cars, and surrounding himself with an entourage that fueled his ego. He lived recklessly, believing the money and success would never stop. Everywhere he went, cameras followed. He thrived in the spotlight, embracing the fame and controversy that came with it. Whether it was outrageous interviews, over-the-top celebrations, or his brash attitude toward opponents, Broner was a fighter fans either loved or loved to hate. But either way, they watched, and as long as he kept winning, he could do no wrong. However, beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. The same attitude that made him a star also made him reckless. The money came fast, but so did the bad habits. Discipline took a back seat to excess, and while the wins kept coming, so did the warning signs that Broner refused to acknowledge. He was at the top of the boxing world, but the higher he climbed, the further he had to fall. What seemed like the beginning of a legendary career was, in reality, the start of a tragic downfall. The undefeated aura wouldn't last forever. The fame, the money, the glory, it was all temporary. And soon, Broner would learn the hard way that in boxing, talent alone isn't enough. The sport is unforgiving, and for those who don't respect it, the fall from grace can be swift and brutal. The Maidana fight was a turning point. Broner went from being the future of boxing to a fighter struggling to live up to his own hype. Up until that moment, he had been untouchable, an undefeated champion who carried himself like a superstar. But in December 2013, everything changed. Marcos Maidana, a relentless power puncher from Argentina, wasn't intimidated by Broner's flashiness. From the opening bell, he pressed forward, applying constant pressure and landing punishing shots. Broner, who had always relied on his speed and defense, was overwhelmed. Maidana's relentless attack exposed weaknesses that had been masked by Broner's earlier success. He wasn't as elusive as Mayweather, nor was he as disciplined. His cocky demeanor turned into desperation as he was knocked down in the second round, something fans had never seen before. He struggled to recover, but Maidana kept coming, punishing him round after round. By the end of the fight, Broner had suffered his first professional loss, a crushing unanimous decision defeat. The impact of that loss went far beyond just one bad night, it shattered the illusion of invincibility that Broner had built. The flashy, undefeated star was no longer untouchable. His aura of dominance had disappeared, and the boxing world started to question whether he was truly an elite fighter. Before the fight, he was hailed as the heir to Mayweather's throne. Afterward, he was just another fighter who had been humbled. Broner promised to bounce back, but things were never the same. He won some fights, but his performances lacked the same confidence and sharpness. He no longer dominated opponents the way he once did. The knockout power that had made him so feared seemed to fade, and instead of making adjustments, he continued the same reckless habits outside the ring that had contributed to his downfall inside of it. Unlike Mayweather, who was known for his extreme discipline, Broner lacked focus. He showed up to training camps out of shape, struggled to make weight, and often seemed more interested in partying than perfecting his craft. While other fighters were in the gym preparing for battle, Broner was out indulging in the very excesses that had already cost him so much. The warning signs had been there all along, but by the time he recognized them, it was too late. The rise had been meteoric, but the fall was even faster. What could have been a legendary career became a cautionary tale of wasted potential, a stark reminder that in boxing, talent alone is never enough. Broner was in nightclubs spending money as if he would always be at the top. His dedication to the sport started to decline, and it showed in his performances. Missed weigh-ins became a common theme. He was fined multiple times for failing to meet the weight requirements, costing him not only money but also opportunities. Promoters and fans began to lose faith in him. The same fighter who had been seen as boxing's future was now struggling to stay relevant. Despite these issues, Broner continued to talk a big game. He still called himself the problem and insisted he was one of the best in the sport. But as the losses piled up and the performances became less impressive, fewer people believed him. The reality was undeniable: Broner was no longer the star he once was. And while his struggles in the ring were troubling, his problems outside the ring were even worse. What happened in the Maidana fight was more than just a loss, it was the beginning of a downward spiral. A fighter who once seemed destined for greatness was now fighting an even bigger battle, one against himself. His lack of discipline, his reckless spending, and his inability to take his career seriously were all catching up with him. The road ahead would only get darker as his personal life began to fall apart just as quickly as his boxing career. Broner made millions in boxing, but he lived recklessly with no financial planning. The money disappeared, and legal issues only made things worse. At the height of his career, he was earning millions per fight, flaunting his wealth with luxury cars, expensive jewelry, and wild nights in the club. He believed the money would never stop flowing. But as the losses piled up and his star power faded, the reality became clear: Broner was running out of options, and worse, he was running out of money. The reckless spending was only part of the problem. His behavior outside the ring became even more erratic, leading to a string of arrests and legal troubles. From assault charges to robbery allegations, Broner found himself in and out of courtrooms, facing lawsuits that drained his finances even further. He was arrested multiple times for incidents ranging from physical altercations to reckless driving. Time and time again, he made headlines for all the wrong reasons, with police reports, mug shots, and courtroom appearances replacing the highlight reels of his boxing victories. In one of his most infamous cases, he was ordered to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in a lawsuit after being accused of assaulting a woman at a nightclub. The legal battles kept stacking up, and soon, Broner found himself drowning in financial obligations he could no longer afford to pay. The fighter who once bragged about making easy money was now struggling to stay afloat. In 2020, the full extent of his financial troubles was exposed when he appeared in court and admitted he was broke. He claimed he had only a few dollars left in his bank account and had been borrowing money from friends just to get by. His extravagant lifestyle had caught up with him, and without big fight paydays, there was nothing left. He even told the judge he was waiting for another fight to come through so he could pay his debts, a stark contrast from the millionaire image he once portrayed. Despite multiple attempts at comebacks, Broner failed to regain his former status. His performances inside the ring became lackluster, and his once famous work ethic had completely deteriorated. He pulled out of scheduled fights, missed weigh-ins, and showed up to training camps unprepared. Promoters grew frustrated with his lack of professionalism, and eventually, even his most loyal supporters started to lose faith in him. Networks like Showtime and PBC, which had once invested heavily in Broner's career, began distancing themselves. He was no longer a guaranteed draw, and with his unpredictable behavior, he became a risky investment. The big fight offers stopped coming, and without consistent income, Broner's financial struggles only deepened. For years, he had insisted he would bounce back, that he was still one of the best in the sport. But with each failed comeback attempt, it became harder to believe. The flashy, undefeated superstar had become a shadow of his former self, weighed down by the consequences of his own reckless decisions. The world watched as his career crumbled. But what was even more concerning was the toll it was taking on his mental health. The money, the fame, the attention, it had all disappeared. And in its place was a man struggling to find his purpose. What had once seemed like an unstoppable rise had turned into a tragic fall. And the worst part? It was only getting darker. Broner's battles weren't just against opponents in the ring, he was fighting himself. Depression, alcoholism, and reckless behavior pushed him to the brink, and the boxing world slowly turned its back on him. For years, Adrien Broner projected an image of confidence and invincibility. He was loud, brash, and seemingly untouchable. But beneath the arrogance and bravado, there was a man struggling with demons he couldn't escape. The first public signs of his mental health struggles came in a series of disturbing social media posts. He began sharing cryptic messages about feeling lost, worthless, and even suicidal. Fans and friends were alarmed, unsure if he was crying out for help or simply seeking attention. But as the posts became more frequent and more troubling, it became clear Broner was in a deep personal crisis. He openly admitted to battling depression and anxiety, revealing that despite his fame and fortune, he often felt alone. Former trainers and close friends expressed concern, saying that Broner was spiraling. They tried to help him, but he wouldn't listen. His refusal to take advice, combined with his destructive habits, made it impossible for those around him to reach him. He was trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage, and with every public meltdown, it became harder to believe he would ever turn things around. Alcohol and substance abuse rumors only made things worse. Broner was frequently seen drinking heavily in public, sometimes during live social media streams where he appeared incoherent and aggressive. The once disciplined athlete who trained like a champion was now more focused on partying than fighting. His erratic behavior became a recurring theme, getting into altercations at clubs, making reckless statements in interviews, and missing training sessions. As his drinking habits worsened, so did his performances in the ring. He wasn't just losing fights, he was showing up out of shape, sluggish, and mentally unfocused. Fans noticed the difference. The explosiveness that once defined his fighting style had faded. Instead of being the sharp, elusive counterpuncher who once dominated, he had become hesitant, flat-footed, and unwilling to let his hands go. The fire that made him a champion was gone. Perhaps the most damaging part of Broner's downfall was the way he burned bridges with those who once supported him. He lashed out at promoters, networks, and even fellow fighters. He publicly criticized Showtime and PBC, the very organizations that had given him some of his biggest paydays. He insulted executives, refused to honor fight contracts, and demanded more money than he was worth. The boxing business is unforgiving, and soon, promoters saw Broner as more of a liability than an asset. Even his relationship with Floyd Mayweather, who once mentored him, deteriorated. Early in his career, Broner idolized Mayweather, often mimicking his style and attitude. But as Broner's career started to fall apart, so did their friendship. Whether it was jealousy, pride, or personal conflicts, the two had a falling out, and Mayweather distanced himself from the troubled fighter. Without his biggest supporter, Broner was left to navigate the sport alone. As the years passed, the once promising superstar had become an afterthought. The same boxing world that once hyped him up had now moved on. Young, hungry fighters were taking his place, and Broner was no longer a priority for promoters or networks. The opportunities that once came so easily were now few and far between. He had no major contracts, no big fights lined up, and no clear path to redemption. What was once a career filled with potential had become a tragic tale of wasted talent. Broner's greatest fight wasn't against an opponent in the ring, it was against himself. And as he continued to spiral, the world could only watch, wondering if he would ever escape the darkness he had created. Adrien Broner could have been one of boxing's all-time greats, but bad decisions, legal troubles, and financial mismanagement turned his life into a tragedy. At one point, he was a pay-per-view attraction, a fighter who could headline major events and bring in millions. Now, he struggles to secure meaningful fights. Once courted by networks and top promoters, Broner has become a risky investment, an unreliable fighter whose name is no longer synonymous with excitement or success. The boxing world has moved on. New stars have emerged, and the sport no longer revolves around Broner. Once scheduled for championship fights under the brightest lights, he now fights on small undercards, struggling to remain relevant. Promoters hesitate to invest in him, knowing his track record of missed weigh-ins, cancelled fights, and lackluster performances. The demand for Broner has dwindled, and the opportunities that once came so easily have all but disappeared. So, what went wrong? The answer is simple. Unlike fighters who saved and invested wisely, Broner burned through his wealth as if it would never run out. He believed he could live recklessly without consequence, that he could party all night and still perform in the ring. But boxing is unforgiving, and it punishes those who don't respect it. A lack of discipline and accountability led to his downfall. He had the talent to be great, but talent alone isn't enough. Work ethic, dedication, and smart decision-making separate legends from wasted potential. Broner could have been mentioned alongside some of the best fighters of his era, a multiple-division champion with a Hall of Fame career. Instead, he became a cautionary tale, a fighter who had everything and lost it all. He was given the blueprint for success but refused to follow it. He had mentors, financial advisors, and promoters who tried to guide him, yet he ignored their advice. And now, at 35, he finds himself at a crossroads. But is it too late? Broner is still young enough to make a comeback. If he truly commits to his craft, gets in shape, and surrounds himself with the right people, he could revive his career. But time is running out. Boxing isn't a sport that waits for anyone, and if he doesn't act now, his window of opportunity will close forever. To return to the top, Broner would need more than just talent. He would need discipline, humility, and a willingness to change. He would need to prove to promoters, fans, and himself that he is serious about redemption. But the biggest question remains, does he still have the fire, or has the problem become unsolvable? The world has watched Adrien Broner rise and fall. Now, the only question left is whether he will fight for his legacy or fade into obscurity. His fate is in his own hands. But if history has shown us anything, it's that his biggest opponent has always been himself.